Those of you who know me know I never use notes when I speak, but this darn thing, you can't remember any of it, let alone some of it. So I have my iPad with some notes. So first I want to say, it was just a little over 10 years ago when I had this crazy idea of running for San Jose City Council. And everyone told me it was a fool's errand, there's no way you can win, you're a Republican, you know, there's no Republicans on the council, what the heck do you know, you're just some dumb retired cop. I had, some people still think that, by the way, but anyway, the person I was running against was, he roomed for the position, he had all the political credentials you need to run for city council. And nobody took me seriously except for one organization, SBARW. You were the very first people that stepped up to a plate and said, Pete, we believe in you, and Pete, we need someone like you on the city council. And ever since that date, you have been steadfastly supporting me. And I just want to say thank you. It was the most rewarding and frustrating time of my life. And I owe a great deal of that to you, and I never forget it. That's why I woke up and got in my car at 5 a.m. and got here at 9 a.m. 4 hours to drive here this morning. It was a miserable commute. But well worth it. I used to come to Republican groups and I would say how great it was to be in a room with people who thought like me, you know, where I could all of a sudden not be guarded in my conversations. I could say what I was thinking. Not that I really reserved myself otherwise, but at least I try not to embarrass my kids and my wife when we were out in public. Because after all, I was that right winger on the San Jose City Council, and I took a lot of heat for that. But my wife and I moved 18 months ago, and we moved to Placer County in the city of Roseville. And as was mentioned, I moved into the assembly district that has the strongest Republican registration by percentage in the state of California. And I'm a lot more comfortable. It's so interesting going to Starbucks and sitting down and having a conversation like we all have amongst ourselves, and having people not yell at me or glare at me, but join into the conversation and add into that conservative viewpoint, bring up things that I hadn't even thought of. It was interesting. I ran for the Central Committee, which I won my first election up in Placer County, so I'm on the Central Committee up there. But getting those signatures, any of you have collected signatures before and had to get Republicans, it's frustrating because you can walk 3 blocks, get 1 Republican, walk 6 blocks, get a Republican. I walked a block and a half and got 30 signatures. It was incredible, just incredible. And even the educators in my area are Republicans. My kids go to 3 schools. I've only checked the registration of the middle school and the high school because I try and keep the elementary school apolitical, but both principals and their vice principals are Republicans. My kids' teachers are Republicans. We have conversation at the dinner table, and I won't get into the specifics because some of them are pretty darn funny, but I'll have my kids chime in, and they're talking from a conservative point of view, and when I ask them where they got that information, they talk about the fact that they had those discussions in class with their teachers. So it's just a whole different world. It's only, without traffic, 2 hours away, at most 4 or 5 hours away, but it is a world away. So I'm there. My heart is still here. I'm still on the Taxpayers Association board. I'm still very involved. You probably heard my name used in vain down here quite a bit recently because of the elections, but I do it because I care. I lived in San Jose 40 years, well, 39 and a half years, but almost 40 years. I grew up out here. I feel a strong bond, and I don't think I'll ever completely separate from San Jose and the county here. So first thing I want to do is let you know on the voter guide, there's one, it's not really an error, but I want to make a clarification on Proposition 53. It says it's about elections, and it is about elections, but more importantly, it's about elections for revenue bonds. And so it's not changing the election process, it's about the bonds. So just make that note to yourself so you remember that. We have a lot to go through because
in addition to that crazy thick state ballot, we got a lot of stuff going on in Santa Clara County. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take things out of order because some of the things feed into other things. So I'm going to do county school measures first, then the state measures or propositions, and then come back to the other measures in the county. Most importantly, because the very first measure on the state is about school funding, so they sort of tie in. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly as far as the schools, because every school wants your money. San Benito High School District wants a $60 million bond. San Jose Evergreen Community College District wants to raise taxes for each home by $155 per year. San Jose Unified School District has a $72 parcel tax. Campbell Union High School District has a $275 million bond. Campbell Elementary School District has a $72 million bond. Sunnyvale School District has a $59 parcel tax. Oak Grove School District has a $132 parcel tax. Los Altos School District has a $33 parcel tax. And Franklin McKinley School District has a $72 parcel tax. Whether it's a bond or a tax on your ballot, it's a tax. All the bond says, it's like the difference between your kids asking for an allowance and asking for a credit card. At least with the allowance, you know what it's going to cost you every week. And some of these say, okay, we're going to assess you this parcel tax based on your home's value, and it's going to be X amount per 100,000 or X amount per year, and you know that's what you're going to do. It's like giving your kids $5 a week for choice. But a bond is like a credit card because the school districts are asking you to approve them borrowing money. You know the amount of money, but you don't know the rate of interest. You don't always know the term of the bond, the repayment term, because that can change. And you have no idea when they actually go out and put it on the market what it's going to cost them to get that issuance. And they don't talk to you anywhere about the interest. So think about when you buy a house, would you buy a house and commit to buying your house and not know what the interest rate is, but say, it doesn't matter because I'm making the decision to buy this house. Doesn't matter if it has points and fees plus you closing costs or variable interest rate or negative amortization or whatever the case may be, I'm buying this house. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not in the financial position to do that. I like to know exactly what I'm committing myself to before I do it. So think about that. Again, are you allergic to me? That's bonds, yeah. I start to get a twitch. She sneezes, you know. So it's just something to keep in mind. Scott Herhold over at the Mercury News wrote a column about this. And those of you who read Scott, I don't always agree with him. In fact, most of the time I don't. But he was very accurate in his column about bonds. And it's like, come on, be honest with the voters. We don't ask for much, just honesty. You know, if you want $100 a month, tell us you want $100 a month. But the main thing is schools float bonds, schools pass parcel taxes because of one reason. They know that we all don't like paying taxes, but we all know that when it comes to our children and our neighborhood kids, we have a little bit of a soft spot, and we say, darn it, we need our kids to have this, so I'm going to approve this. It's only $100 a month. And people do that. It's a sort of a human nature thing. It's kind of like when you poll Congress, polls people's opinion about Congress. Overall, the best they can do is 13 or 15% approval rating. But if you ask the same people what they think of their congressperson, the approval rating goes through the roof. And it's the same thing with schools. It's that, you know, it's a little different because it's my kid, it's my grandkid, it's my neighbor's kid, so we're going to do that. But I want you to think about this in a little bit different perspective. And every time you think about voting for a bond or a parcel tax for a school, you are reinforcing the bad behavior of our state legislature and our governor, because you're telling them the state doesn't have to worry about funding education because we'll guilt trip our residents into doing it themselves. And every single school district has passed something. I don't think that you could find anyone in the state that can show you a property tax statement that doesn't have a school assessment on it, because people keep going and pleading the SOP. And it is. It's a sad state of affairs when you think about what our state has done for education, or what our state hasn't done for education. No matter how many times we as the voters have gone through the ballot because we've read something in here that's going to protect funding for schools at the state level, we pass it. Those clowns up there find another way around it. So it doesn't matter. You know, the lottery, the money was supposed to go to the schools. That money went to the schools. They just took an equal or greater amount away from the schools. You know, so we need to, as a community, as parents, as educators, as people who really care about our children, our grandchildren, and their children, the state's got to get their act together about prioritizing education, because education is important. So what does that mean to you if your kid's school doesn't have the money that they need to educate your kid? Well, I think for all of us in this room, well, I should say grandkids, not that I'm passing any judgment on anyone here, our kids and grandkids, all of us have the resources to be good parents and good grandparents and good aunts and good uncles. And regardless of what the situation at school is, if a child has good guidance and support from home, you can get them well educated. You have choices with charter schools and private schools. You have all these different things. But my personal opinion is, if you're not going to put them in private school, you're not going to put them in homeschool, you're not going to put them in a charter school, and you're going to put them in public school, which, by the way, I do, you just have the commitment to make sure that your child gets educated. That's our role as parents, to do that. So I say on all school bond measures and parcel taxes, I vote no, because I don't want to reinforce the bad behavior of our state legislature. So I want you to think about it from that perspective. And that leads me right to Proposition 51, another ballot measure to attempt to address school issues. But here's what this one does. It's $9 billion in bonds to fund school construction. And it's going to be about $8.5 billion in interest that they're not telling you about. And this is to build schools in areas that are seeing population growth. But what's interesting is when you get down into the minutia of this measure, you find that you can go to school districts that are having explosive growth, but they won't qualify for the funding. They'll have to still pass their own bond measures. I believe it's a poorly written bond measure that is not going to provide the funding that you actually need to build schools. And let me just say, as you all know me, where I sit on taxes, I do believe that there is a place for taxes, and that's for infrastructure and for those things that we as individuals and businesses can't do for ourselves. The infrastructure, things like roads and sewer systems and water treatment plants and, police protection, things of those natures are schools. So they do deserve tax money. I just don't think this accomplishes it. What this does is really create a slush fund to build pet school projects, is my opinion. And so I would urge you no. I think we need to really put the pressure again on our state legislature to deal with school funding in a more permanent way and be responsible in the annual budget. Proposition 52, state fees on hospitals. So we have this national healthcare system that fixed everything. And we were able to keep our own doctors. We were able to keep our insurance without our rates going up. We were able to do all that wonderful stuff. And I hope everyone knows what sarcasm is here. Hopefully there's no Sheldon Coopers in the room, and those of you who understand the reference. But, they're asking for basically matching funds to match the federal government, which means they're asking you for tax out of your left pocket to match taxes they're going to take out of your right pocket to pay for more health care that you are not going to receive with no legislative oversight. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, wouldn't it be a more interesting concept if we just took our healthcare system and turned it into a free market system, so you could actually decide whether you want to get a $3,000 MRI or a $500 MRI, or if you wanted to see a doctor that charges, $50 a visit or $75 a visit, or you actually could talk to your doctor about the benefit of whether you need an MRI or a CAT scan or an X-ray and figure out the best way and look at it and decide if that's what you want to do. Kind of how I think I'd like to do it. Wouldn't it be better if we just got rid of the state border walls that say this insurance company can't sell insurance to this other person there? I think all of these different things we've just created a system where we have perverted the free market system in a way that we prevent competition, we obscure costs, and we basically keep the taxpayers in the dark about what they are going to get as we slip the money out of their wallet. So, it's an ongoing. Well, I don't know if anything in healthcare is permanent, but I'm going to leave time for questions, I promise. So moving on, Prop 53 revenue bonds. Here's actually a proposition you might want to vote for. Right now, the state legislature can basically, they have to come to you if they want to pass a specific bond. They have to come to you if they want to pass a tax. But they can build infrastructure projects and incur public debt without really any vote. And they sometimes, I don't know if you've ever heard of a mismanaged project like high-speed rail. You have something like that where they told us it was going to cost an outrageous, $10 billion or something like that. And I think it's going to be more like $60 billion, and it still will start nowhere and end nowhere. But you have all this debt, and once you approve the project, they just keep going and getting in debt for you on that. And it's like, well, you approved it. We got to pay for it. So we're going to do this, and don't worry about it. We'll get the interest paid off sometime. So basically, Proposition 53 says that these type of revenue bonds for infrastructure projects that cost more than $2 billion, which is still a lot of money. We're giving them authority up to $2 billion to manage the state. But anything over that, come to the voters and ask permission to incur this additional debt. So that's something I think I'm seeing here that SVRW has a recommendation of yes, and I think it really is good oversight. It'd be one thing if we could trust our legislature. So if you trust our legislature, but that a majority of them will make good decisions most of the time, raise your hand. Okay, so those 0 people that raise their hand can vote against this. Here's another one. 53 and 54 are the two easy ones in my mind. 54 is basically a sunshine law. The state legislature passed a law a number of years ago called the Brown Act, and Chuck Page is in the back over there, not paying attention. He's watching on his phone. He's served in local office like I have, and the state told us local electeds and school districts and cities and counties, if you're going to do anything, you have to do it out in the open, and you have to publish your stuff 72 hours in advance, and yada yada. You got to do all these things, and local government actually is able to work under those rules. In San Jose, under Chuck Reed's administration, while I was on the council, we increased that to 10 days, 14 days on some items, and really to enable people to have the time to read things. I'll tell you, as a council member, there was no way I could get through the packet with my staff and all the resources I had available to me to get through a Tuesday council meeting if I got the paperwork on Friday night. I don't know how a member of the public would do it. So I think any of these sunshine type laws are important, but what this basically does is start to hold the state legislature to the same standards. Because many people don't know, our state legislature has free reign on what they do. They can give you a bill, and you could understand it and completely support it and have read it and say this is the best thing in the world, and you lobby all your elected officials to vote for it. And then at midnight, somebody makes a motion on the floor to what they call gut and amend. and they basically delete all the text in the bill and replace it with substitute text, and a vote's taken 15 minutes later, and that measure, that piece of bill, legislature, is passed. Many times with nobody really knowing what's in it. It's kind of like that famous quote, well, we have to pass the bill so you can see what's in the bill. But basically, our state legislature operates that way right now. And here's another interesting thing. Our state legislature, I don't know if any of you are bored enough to watch the legislature channel, but you can watch your state assembly and senators and committees and general session. You can watch their meetings and listen to them talk. I guess I'll be nice. Talk about the different things that they're doing. And it's all live streamed. But do you know that if you were to capture a recording of that and post it on your website, you'd be committing a crime in the state of California? They prohibit you currently from using video recordings of the state legislature for any purpose. And this measure will change that. It will say not only do they have to have their bills out in public 72 hours beforehand, and if there's an amendment, they just can't vote on it. They have to wait and sunshine it, let people see it. But it will also make those video recordings of these people who are supposed to be representing us up at the state houses available for the public's use. Because after all, we pay for that recording. We pay for all that, but it would be a crime if you use it. So I think this is a sunshine measure well worth supporting. I personally wish it were greater time periods and all that, but baby steps. And I think that 54 is a very good deal. 55. How many times have you heard of a temporary tax? So 55 merely extends a temporary tax. It's not going to cost you anything because you're already paying it. But it was temporary from 2012 to 2016, 4 years. And they're not saying, well, we're just not done spending, so we need another 4 years. They want it for 12 years. So they want to extend it and triple it for 12 more years. And even without that, they have more revenues coming in. Revenues are increasing in our state. But the most important thing is, if again, we got to hold our legislature accountable. If we tell them we're going to give them something temporarily, it's got to be temporary. You can't just say, we're going to give it temporary, and oh, I'm glad you enjoy it, we're going to let you keep it forever. It's just not good fiscal discipline. It's not good discipline at all. For those of you who have children, know that if you behave with your children like this, they'd be huge brats and unsuccessful in life. You just can't allow that to happen. So if you ever want things to be temporary in the future, you have to enforce it when you say they're temporary today. And I think there's so much waste at our state level, and they just want to continue to do it. And I'll tell you, all of those increases, very few of those dollars went to where they told us they would go. They went to other places in the budget. And we already have the highest tax rates in the nation, and this would just keep us there. And if we want to remain competitive in any way, or if we want to try and get competitive, we got to reduce these taxes. So I don't believe that is a good temporary tax. I don't know about you, but 12 years just doesn't seem temporary to me. And it's sure 12 more than the 4 I thought they promised us 4 years ago. Prop 56, cigarette taxes to fund health care, tobacco use prevention, research, and law enforcement. Because they know if they put law enforcement in there, you're going to vote for it. So just so you know, it's a 300% increase in a tax. Not only on cigarettes, but e-cigarettes. So, you have studies that show vaping, these e-cigarettes, are 95% safer than cigarettes, but they're still treating them as if they're cigarettes because, after all, it looks like a cigarette. But more importantly, you have a tax on something that, especially in the vaping side of things, for those of you who are okay with sin taxes, think about it this way. Even if you don't like smoking, probably one of the best ways to reduce smoking is to help people stop smoking. And one of the most successful ways to stop smoking is to use a vaping along the way, and using a step down. So I think it will actually keep people from stopping smoking, and it's just a 300% tax hike, and the money's not even going to go where we think it's going to go anyway. We know that from past performance. So I don't think it's a good way to go, and would encourage you to really think about that. So Prop 57. How many of you are concerned about property crimes in your neighborhoods? Property crimes have gone up throughout the state. They get a lot of attention in San Jose for other reasons, but they're going up equally in other parts of the state, even up in beautiful Roseville where I live. And a lot of that's due to Prop 47, which basically said that don't worry about these nuisance crimes like commercial burglary or theft or any of these other things. We're just not going to, we're going to write people tickets and they'll stop doing it. And it took a lot of nonviolent criminals out of jail, put them on the street so they could take people out of prison and put them in jail. It was all a shell game just to try and save money on the state budget so that they have more money to pay for the pensions. But essentially, this is now going to take that further and decriminalize a whole list of other crimes. So essentially, what it says is, like 47, 57 will continue the practice of not holding criminals responsible for their behavior and not providing meaningful punishments for people who commit crimes. Now, I'm all for sentencing reform and changing our prison system. Our incarceration system needs to be changed, because all it right now is a graduate program in criminology, and that is being a criminal, not preventing criminals. So it needs a lot of work, but simply not holding people responsible for their actions is probably not the best way to go about it. So I think now if you see this same crime trends after 57 that we saw after 47, we're going to be in a world of hurt from a public safety perspective, especially those crimes that really affect those of us in the room. So, 58. Non-English languages allowed in public education. Now, my dad came here from Greece not knowing how to speak English, and he figured it out. I wanted to learn Spanish a few years back, and what was suggested to me was to go to a full immersion program. That's the best way to learn. My children are learning foreign languages at school, and they're taught in a full immersion program. They go to school, their teachers in foreign language don't speak any English to them. They start off dazed and confused, and they figure it out as school time goes on. It has been proven time and time again that full immersion is the best way to learn a language. But now we want to say, for those who don't speak English in our public education system, let's teach them in their native language so they don't have the burden of learning English. And, you know, to me, this isn't about immigration and not immigration. It's about language. And how do you learn a language? If you want to be successful, and I'm not just talking about in the United States, but if you want to be successful in the world, you need to speak English. In a majority of the world, and the best way to learn English is in full immersion. So I think that going backwards in this aspect and enabling people to not learn, I think is not a good thing. So be interesting to see what some of you think afterwards when we have the discussion. 59, it's an advisory measure, which basically the legislature is saying, tell us what you think, and then we'll still make a decision on what we think anyway. But it's whether to overturn the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And for those of you who don't know, Citizens United was a case in front of the U.S. Supreme Court that essentially said, if you are a business, you have the right to political free speech just as if you're an individual. And this put a whole bunch of people on the left side of the spectrum in a tizzy. Because after all, corporations are big, evil machines that gobble up society and screw things up. And this is, bad corporate dark money that's going to screw everybody. And quite frankly, it's not true. Because what are corporations? Corporations are owned by people like you and me who own stocks and mutual bonds. They're owned by public employees who have a pension, whose pension system is invested in those corporate investments in stocks. And so really, if you think about it, all of these bond and tax measures and sales taxes and all these things that businesses often pay as well, they have no voting voice in the election process. If you own 10 buildings in San Jose and the city of San Jose is going to increase the building permits or is going to charge a tax on buildings, you have no say in that if you don't live in the city of San Jose. So the only voice you have as a business is your political speech to be able to go tell people what you think. And so it really is crazy to think that people would try and, in this day and age, condone the suppression of speech by anybody in any form is just crazy. So I think that it would be not a good idea to support that, because after all, corporations are just people who have assembled together to run an enterprise. Just like this organization is a group of people who have assembled together to associate, and you have the freedom of association and the freedom of speech. So hopefully we can continue that. Prop 60, condoms and pornographic films. I don't even know why we're voting on that. I'll just say free speech. It's I don't even know how to respond to this one other than why are we the voters deciding whether a porn actress or actor is going to be engaged in an activity with or without a condom? I'm going to leave it at that. So we have one voice that says yes. I'm a personal choice. We'll talk about that. We'll get to the discussion part later. Oh man, I'm past time. I got to go through these quick. Drug price standards 61 is prohibiting state agencies from paying more than the price negotiated by U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs for drugs. Again, it's just another way to muck up the free market system. I want to talk about the death penalty ones because those are the important ones. There's two death penalty measures, 62 and 66. One's about procedures and one's about repealing, and whichever one gets the highest votes wins. Whether you're for or against the death penalty, I'll let you decide whether you think it should be repealed or not. That's sort of a moral question that people struggle with. On the procedures, it limits appeals, and it doesn't fix any of the structural flaws in the system. We do have some serious flaws in our death penalty system that if you believe in the death penalty, those flaws should be fixed. Like if you are on death row and there is blood evidence from the crime scene that could prove you innocent, you can be, and many people have been prohibited by the state from having that evidence examined with DNA evidence. So I just say, if you're going to amend the procedures, let's make them fair for everybody. If people should have the right to a defense. They shouldn't be able to go on for decades and decades and decades, but you also shouldn't prevent people from testing evidence and things like that in crimes. So I think both of these could be fixed in different ways. Death penalty, repeal, that's up to you to decide. And if you're going to fix the procedures, this is a poorly worded and poorly designed procedural change. 62 is the repeal. So I'm telling you that's a moral issue. You have to decide what you believe on the death penalty. If you believe in the death penalty, you would want to vote against the repeal. Vote no on 62. If you, either way on the death penalty appeals process, it's poorly worded. It doesn't fix the structural problems in the system. So I'm saying it's not a fix for the problems that exist. So I would say no as well. So it's a step in the right direction, I guess you could say, but it's sort of a halfway step step there, but it in no way fixes the problem. Prop 63, background checks for ammunition purchases and large capacity magazine bans. I say no. All you have to do is read the Second Amendment to understand that one. Marijuana legalization. I think everyone in this room's already got their mind made up on that. Let's get to the local ones real quick because they're important. So Measure A in the county is another bond, another tax hidden in a bond. $950 billion. Did I get that right? No, sorry, 950 million. Million. I get all these numbers confused. Yeah, $1 billion, basically. $1 billion bond for public housing. And basically, they say they're going to build 2,000 homes for the homeless. The math doesn't work. Measure A, I recommend a no vote on there. It's more money going to a system that isn't working in our county. No, that's a county bond. It's a Measure A county bond for public housing. And then Measure B is a half-cent sales tax to pay for VTA, the worst run transit agency in the U.S., the worst run transit agency in the U.S. that you already have approved, not you, but our society has approved tax increases over and over and over again for, and they still haven't completed their projects. Measure E, opportunity to work. Measure E is in San Jose. It says the city would be mandating that if you have employees, you would have to, no, Measure E, opportunity to work. It may not be on yours, but it is a San Jose issue. It's called opportunity to work, and it would put a restriction on employers that would say before you can hire any new employees, you have to offer all hours available that would go to that new employee to any existing employee for them to refuse before you could hire somebody else. Right, until they're full-time workers. So it basically is going to tell business owners how to run their business and how to staff their thing. So that's a clear no. Measure F, pension modification. There's no secret that I've been pretty vocal on that. This will increase pensions retroactively for 1,300 city employees. It will increase the benefit by about, I think it's 26%. It will increase costs associated with that benefit about 36%. It will create a new benefit for people who are already retired, a new supplemental benefit that they would receive each year in a matter to keep up with inflation. And if you want to learn more about that, go to protectpensionreform.com because it's all outlined there. I recommend a no vote on that. The Measure B needs to be fixed. There are a number of things that weren't done right in Measure B that need some clarification. But this basically throws the baby out with the bathwater and goes back to the old practices of making promises that we can't afford to keep. Measure G is business tax modernization. That sounds so good, but basically it's a huge increase in the business tax in San Jose. So it's a increase in the business tax, and it will raise the business tax for all businesses, and some pretty significantly. So with that, we only have a little bit of time for questions because I went on so long. Yeah, the Measure G, the business tax modernization, there is an exemption, but it will apply to almost nobody. It's a very, very small exemption. And it will hit some company, mid-size, mid to upper, just below big companies will get hit really, really hard. Over there, stand up for me and, yep, shout it out. Revenue bonds are bonds that are issued based on revenue projected to come into the government coffers. So basically, you go to a bond company and you say, I have this stream of revenues coming in the future, so I would like to bond against that, and they give you the money, and that money stream is dedicated to repaying those bonds. Yes, that's actually a very valid point, and her comments were, because there are additional regulations on some of the edibles and the other things, and people are already buying it, so if it's legalized, wouldn't the tax revenue? That is certainly a position to take, and those of you know me that I'm more libertarian than anything, and a libertarian philosophy would also say, let people do to themselves what they wish to do, and government should stay out of it. I would just say take a careful look at what's happened in Colorado in the number of accidents and influence cases and injuries that they've had related to their legalization, and then make your decision. So again, none of these things are black and white. They're all shades of gray in between, and depending on whether you know where your viewpoints on legalization and regulation are, you could see them differently. And that's a valid point that I've heard from a lot of people. Yeah, it's difficult. I've even talked to a number of the council members that didn't understand everything that's in Measure F and the impacts. I would just say I tried, the Taxpayers Association tried really hard to make a easily digestible plain language version at protectpensionreform.com. It's just the facts so that you can see what the pension does. You'd also, just so you guys know, after the city council under Mayor Chuck Reed's leadership passed my resolution to end pensions for council members and go to a defined benefit program, as soon as the new mayor and council took office without taking a vote of the people, they reinstituted them, and they're all getting pensions, defined benefit pensions. That has never been voted on publicly or discussed publicly. That's a whole nother thing. Yes. So I would just boil it down to the big difference with Prop 53 is you can either let the legislature continue to obligate your future revenue streams, whether they are old or new streams, for you, or you can have oversight. That's all that is at measure there. We have, I think our time's up, right? I'm sorry, our time's up. I'll hang out for a little bit.